All right, guys, welcome back. We are joined by cArn, now of Fnatic, Chief Gaming Officer, the official title, and you can see with behind him over his shoulders some lovely trophies. Before we get into it with him, apparently Moobot took a snooze on us. We will definitely get mods up in the channel in the next week, and we apologize for all of the porn that's been going through the chat. I probably will watch some of it later, but right now probably inappropriate. So cArn, huge news. First and foremost, TI, you were there. You guys finished top 4. Bit of a decent, I'd say a decent run for you guys. I didn't rate you guys quite that high. And then you go from that, you get on a plane, and you arrive in London with a whole new CS lineup. Busy 48 hours, I'd say.
Well, 48 hours. It's been, I mean, TI went on for like 2 weeks, right? And I mean, similar to the CSGO situation, it's been going on for a while. So it wasn't like I just arrived here at the airport in London and okay, whoops, we have a new team. So anyway, it's been like 2 super busy weeks, probably aged a year within this time span, but here we are on the brighter side, I suppose. Now looking into a very exciting future. Yeah, but obviously it's been a lot of stressful, a lot of episodes of back and forth. And I guess we're going to speak to that in a moment. But other than that, health is good. I think the TI 6th placement for our Dota team, placing 4th, is not decent. It's actually super fucking good. So word, considering where we were at in that game and kind of like the background we had with the team and coming in and placing so high, it made me really proud. But yeah, I was literally sleepless in Seattle because being on the Pacific time zone, working towards Europe and also attending an event and helping the guys as much as I can. Not a Dota expert, obviously, but quite happy to now be a little bit more fresh, although appearance-wise I might not look that, but mentally I'm kind of starting to get there again and starting to focus on what's coming next.
So you kind of, I'm going to let Henry kind of go through this because he's got the player experience and can kind of delve into your mind, I think, a little deeper. But you mentioned this has kind of been a year in the making. When did all this start? Like, was it boosted, that's a good word with you guys, no offense. But was this started kind of compounded by the whole Olaf injury, or was there issues before that, but because it was winning, everyone sucked it up?
Just to set the record straight, right? I didn't say 1 year. I was talking about Dota.
Okay. I wasn't sure what you were alluding to.
This is obviously, so CSGO situation. It's been, I mean, the issues and the reasoning behind this splits and us taking this direction and Godsent absorbing JW, Flasha, and Crims. The reasoning and the aspects to it has obviously been going on for a while, right? But I mean, in the nature of sports, things could have like turned out very differently in the event of success. Winning E-League, winning other tournaments and so forth can obviously glue a team longer together, right? But yes, here we are now, obviously, with surprising news. And honestly, I'm personally surprised myself that all the debacle that's been going on now in the Scandinavian and even worldwide off-season with a lot of rumors and whatnot, stuff we hear, at least from the back end, that this hasn't not been like, in other conversations, Reddit, Twitter, and stuff like that. By just reading the comments, you know, on HSV and Twitter, people are like, what the fuck? Like, what happened here? Yeah. So I guess we work quite all right on the PR side and keeping things secret. And I'm so happy about the Godsent's professionalism, all the players' professionalism on both camps of these teams.
Yeah, it's pretty rare for a lineup like this. It's something so explosive. Like, this is like a bomb being dropped in itself, right? This is like one of the biggest roster changes, I think, since the first French Shuffle. We saw that kind of crazy scene go down, and like the fact you managed, you guys to keep the lid on this and actually announce it on the day, like that's insane. Like I'll admit, I got wind of it maybe 2 or 3 days ago, but I was so crazy, I just didn't think it was true. So like congratulations in that respect. But let's get into this little bit of an interview then. Let's see if we can kind of dissect what actually happened with the team. So let's go right back to when Dennis first joined the lineup, right? We got rid of Pronax, we brought in this fragging power of Dennis, and it seemed like everything was going perfectly. The first 6 tournaments, the team looks unbeatable. They look amazing. They had a couple of like trip ups in the early stages of the tournaments, but they always fought back. They were always so good at the fundamentals of Counter-Strike. What do you think the reason for this dropping off was? What was the start of the decline? We kind of discussed this kind of honeymoon mentality earlier. Do you feel like it was teams adjusting to the way Fnatic were playing, or was there something else that was going on in the back behind the scenes?
I think it's multiple reasons, and even if I've been, I wouldn't say epicenter, but I've been like managing the entire thing, right? It's hard to just pinpoint like one or even a few aspects to it, why we ended up where we ended up now. But yeah, I mean, if you read between the lines, if you just look at the shuffle, like practically looking at the shuffle that happened, 2 players stay, 3 guys stay, leaving the team, sorry. It's obvious that it's a split that have occurred within the group of our players, right? And we're sitting here, you know, I mean, I generally manage our teams based on my experience as a player on a fairly hands-off basis, meaning that we, from an organization point of view, Fnatic, will not just come in and dictate things. We will not go in and say, okay, we need a sniper in the team now, or you need to do this, or you need to rush more, or you need to be more passive and whatnot. I'm working from an approach where it's more like setting up a direction and feeding certain feedback and my reasoning, and based on my experience basically from being in esport and Counter-Strike for like 15 years or something like that, right? So it's been to a certain degree quite frustrating, but still under our control to a degree that we kind of had the face in our hands with 5 contracted players and all that. You kind of asked me to start off with, right, with the like reasoning. So obviously it's a social split, right? And then you can break down that into so many levels and look at it from so many sides, right? That's just the dynamic on like social relationships. The performance side, all of injuries surely has, I mean, all of these things are kind of interconnected in this ecosystem, right? So we had to replace Olof temporarily. Venton stepped in. Previous to that, it was Pleasant, an up-and-coming player in Sweden. And I guess we never really got back to our own identity. That probably stressed and escalated like those intersocial disconnects, if you call it that, further. And eventually we find ourselves in a position by not, I guess, also kind of accelerated further by not winning the E-League final, which I think we honestly should have won, because we were a better team. Obviously, in that very game, they were better. So hats off to Virtus.pro. They're still going strong, right? A lot of respect for these guys. But yeah, we sat down over the past 2-3 weeks now during the off-season. There was an off-season we actually went into, like in the middle of the summer. We felt like we have a top 3 roster. We've been close to winning more majors than we already have. We have superstars in the team. We have a good group. Vugo and Flasha deals with the in-game side of things. So it was like, from an organization point of view, of course, super frustrating to end up how we haven't, like where we are at today with the split. But I think I use the word bright side, that we like left this thing behind us now. A lot of learnings from it, but nevertheless, we do go into this with confidence, and we do go into this with a level of control where we feel like we have kind of like we are able to shape our own fate here, right?
Yeah.
But let's also be real, right? We are losing 3 very strong players. We are losing a major spot. It's a lot of hard work around the corner from an organization point of view. Yes, relatively hands-off, meaning that we trust our players and our team management, but we're going to do everything we can. And personally, also, I will be as involved as I possibly can, dealing with 5 divisions at the same time. It's not always easy to get back on track, meaning qualification for the upcoming major in, I guess, January, February. Great performances in the EPL and the ECS and all the other tournaments we have ahead of us. And it's going to be a different group in many ways, both personalities, but also like the kind of attributes people come in with. And we're going to try to set as many processes and systems in place from an early moment on, so that the new players, less experienced players, can feel comfortable from day one. And that's something I think Fnatic historically, not only in CSGO, CS 1.6, CS Source, any other esport title has been quite good at, meaning bringing up talent and making them grow and blossom under our wings.
Let's talk about those pressures with these new players, right? From our sources, it's been established that Venton, like you said, the player who had replaced Olof Meister and been brought into the full-time lineup now, he's going to be the in-game leader. And for someone to be the inexperienced player of the roster and one of the guys who hasn't necessarily played on the big stage, do you feel like that's going to be too much pressure on an inexperienced player's shoulder to be trying to rein in and control these big names like Olof Meister and Dennis, people who are established at one big events? Do you feel like this is the right move for him at the moment?
Surely a lot of pressure taking such a role, but I think all the news that we have in relation to our like strategical approach and our supporting staff news, so to speak, hasn't been announced yet. So we're working in the back end now. First thing first was to establish a solid lineup of players. Mm-hmm. Now also further assistances to Vugo to help out our analyzing of opponents, our preparation going into games, training players, something I personally also would like to be a part of. Basically, you have some information right, but we haven't gotten there right now. Sure. I think we have a general idea how we will shape up things in terms of who's going to do the AWPing, who's going to be aggressive, who's going to be this and that. But yeah, especially when it comes to tactical side, it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and we're going to do, again, everything we can from an organization standpoint to invest further, allowing Vugo to have more time to what he does best, and also provide him with more tools, instruments, and even staffing that can help take our guys back into the limelight.
You talked about roles and restructuring and who's going to do what and taking the time to figure that out. Just quickly, if you look at the transactions, look, Venton was a stand-in for you guys when Olaf was injured. Everyone knows that. Plisson,
right.
then Venton. Pauf was the third man that came out of Godsent that's not involved in this. What led to the decision of maybe Pauf not being involved, you guys going with Venton? Was it good experiences with him before? I mean, a lot of people on social medias are already saying he's the odd man in this deal. What's his position? Is it out of necessity to lock down a roster and it's temporary? Or is he taking on a bigger role in this team? I mean, there's a lot of skepticism, I guess, around him in this.
Right. So we just put it in a bit more context when it comes to our reasoning behind the pickup of certain players here, right, and the certain roles they're going to fill. So we talked about our previous lineup, right, and historically in Fnatic, I wouldn't say that we have at any given point have been super great at making sure that people are understanding and filling their roles. We have, at least for the past 3-4 years, had a lot of aim power, meaning that when we do hit our shots, it's not so much about the strategies. It's more about like confidence, planting the bomb, setting up a good setting up a good positioning and basing team play and communication that Scandinavian teams in general are great for. But I mean, learning now, obviously, with a kind of, I guess, a diluted Scandinavian landscape where now Godsent will have more firepower, they will have more experience, there will be a more a more solid force, not only in Scandinavia and Europe, but the entire world. We really need to kind of look at what we do have, what assets do we have, and how do we invest in these and merge them together in the best possible way. So regards of Venton, yes, I mean, there is this kind of, not general consensus, that's the wrong word, but general opinion that, okay, that doesn't make sense at all. But for us, it actually very much does, in the sense that he comes in with understanding the benefits and the importance of the social side of things, the team play side of things, and also being very open to taking a role which a lot of people might not want to take, being kind of a backup player, being defensive, and doing the dirty work, so to speak. And I think if you base a team around too many stars and too many strong wills, you may end up winning tournaments, of course, but over time, people gonna be able to spot out your strategies and whatnot, and that's something I think Venton also comes in with. More experience than the two other players, I'd say, but at the same time, he can also hit his shots, right? And I think we saw many episodes of that when he did stand in for us. But again, I just want to reiterate that, yes, we understand there is a lot of work ahead of us. We do understand also that purely on paper, right, we have what people may call a weaker lineup. We have a lot of faith in our core group. We have a lot of faith in our resources, our structure to make this work. So this is not something we think is just going to fall into place in the next week, and we're going to just be dominant from day one. Counter-Strike is simply put too competitive to allow such, unless you have a lot of luck, of course. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I'm not religious by any means, but I've been in this situation before, also as a player myself, where I split from there's a massive split in the group, and you go forward with a completely different constellation, and you need to go into such with super open-minded and a lot of a big understanding about the work that you have ahead of you. So that was a very long answer, but basically we have thought carefully about our arrangements when it comes to the recruitment. You mentioned Pauf earlier, and he was probably never a part of our consideration for that role.
Interesting.
I think you've raised a really interesting point with the split you went through in Fnatic originally in 2010, when you get right in Forest to SK Gaming, and then you brought in arguably lesser known players or less respected players within the scene, and then you went on past that and you actually came out on top. You won like 2 big IEM events, and that is testament to show you that the hard work, it is not necessarily everything as black and white as people are seeing on these like pieces of paper we see right now. No one really knows how these lineups are going to gel together. We know you've got 3 very young players and experienced players, some might say. They're going to be very hungry to prove themselves. They're not going to have the same sort of jaded attitude maybe some of the pros do these days, and they kind of expect themselves to be winning all these big tournaments. They're going to want to work hard. They're going to want to learn from Dennis and Olaf Meister. I think you've got a really exciting prospect going forward.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, said, we have experience being in this situation before, where we not only just change the people, right, but the skill set and assets they put into a team. And it's all about being adaptive, and that's something we have to remind ourselves every day we wake up now, right? That we cannot just go into every single practice game and play the same game we played before, because that's not going to work, right? We need to figure out and find our own touch and own approach to the game. But I think, again, we have the ingredients and substances we need in order to build another legendary team or epic team, whatever buzz you want to put there, right? But the goal first and foremost is to get into practice. We haven't done that yet. We have a few guys that is currently not home. But since we have ESL games coming up early next week, I'm sure it's just a matter of time, 1 or 2 days from when we're going to go into practice. So I'm super excited about that. Purely from a community approach, again, being here a little bit on the business side and think about the long-term future for esports, I think yes, for me, stress level-wise, and I'm probably, I see already kind of red in my face, I'm probably have a approaching heart attack incoming due to the stress and the 24/7-ness of esports. But I think it's great overall for the community that there are things that are happening even in the middle of a year, because, again, it's not football, it's not American football, it's not golf, whatever, where the sports have been around for hundreds of years or 100 years. We need to, that we have this kind of distinguished off-season here, I think actually serves a decent purpose when it comes to the storyline, when it comes to the hype going into the next tournament.
We actually, that was one of the points we talked about a little bit on the show, and Olaf was someone who tweeted out about scene saturation. It's a subject that I bring up time to time on social media. There's just too much going on. Is this almost a good thing for Counter-Strike? You mentioned the 2 weeks is good, but this shuffle, it creates new interest. Is this something we need to see more regularly? Like, how does it, like, with the amount of stuff going on?
In terms of frequency, in terms of frequency, I think it doesn't make sense to have it more than like once or twice a year. I guess, again, now we have one that was agreed with the player union, or so-called player union, that is going to be in early August. Then you have this natural one that it's pretty much the only time you have an off time in esports, and that is like post-Christmas, right? In between the years. But yeah, I do think it fills a purpose. If it's more kind of like scheduled out in advance, it's also going to allow us as an organization to plan more forward. I see a lot of debates about the kind of like what is an organization's purpose in esports. Surely I'm biased in my role as a chief gaming officer and a co-owner of Fnatic, that I think team serves a purpose. And I think we have probably more than the most organizations in the world, a lot of proofs that we actually provide our players with an environment from where they can thrive. We are not obviously perfect every single time. We do mistakes like everyone else. But then again, we talk about a landscape that is constantly changing. Yep. Cannot run down to the local library and read about how to do esports, although a lot of people have tried to write books about it. So yeah, I think surely there is a transition period where you have to have a balance between the players, what is the definition of what they can do and not do, and then the organizations. But I kind of like the idea of having it way more scheduled, more predictable, because it's just going to allow us to sell more sponsorship, invest in more teams, invest further into the player salaries that, by the way, is already super high and maybe not even as it is today. I also would like to see, now we're kind of like jumping into another topic. We talked about oversaturation and such, right? Players do need break. Yes, we're not talking about a physical sport. We're talking about a sports of eye and hand coordination, mentally draining. It's a lot of practice that goes into this, definitely more than the conventional athletes, simply because you don't have the physical restrictions. But hey, we also need to think about the ecosystem and structure behind us, right? How do we make this a viable future for, let's say, tier 2 and tier 3 organizations and players? So yeah, I think this like a lot of things we still need to figure out. But I like in the context of like, should organizations have the ESL spot, for example, or the league spot or the major spot? I'm not always on the same side as people who are saying, okay, it should obviously belong to the players. In some cases, I think it definitely makes sense. But in other cases, it's a long conversation. You can look at it in so many angles, right? But for us, what I at least refer to as a stable organization with what I think is a high reputation, we've been around since 2004, that we just should be completely, that we should just cease to exist in the space of rankings or qualification spots or whatever, just because we change players. Yes, esport and sports are not always similar, right? But I think they have found out a few things in the decades they have run their businesses, right? At the same time, we should tweak things and we should make it into our thing. I'm not saying anything other than that, of course.
It's an interesting point. Fnatic going through a change like this. You mentioned stability. You guys have like 2 million followers on Facebook. 800,000 or something along those lines, at 200,000. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong on Twitter. You guys definitely have that sustainability. You bring that sort of, I guess, structure,
Foundation.
like you're saying, salary, the payments, sponsorship. But we're seeing teams starting to go back to making their own orgs. As someone who was a player in the past, and again, you've gone through a shuffle like this, what's your opinion on that, and how do you see the struggles of that? You know, are there pros, are there cons? Do you think that that's something that's long-term viable, or is that a short-term success while that team is successful and that's it?
I think it's a window that exists as of today. But I mean, with further structure in place, when the revenues are starting to kind of hit the same trajectories that we see from player salaries, meaning that we as an organization and the whole industry can show ROI, the value, it's going to be a domino effect very shortly in coming, right? Where a lot of mainstream corporations, big brands come into esports and finally understands that this is the best way to reach a very, very important demographic. I mean, 17 to 34-old males that obviously do not read newspaper anymore. They might not even buy tickets to go down and see the local football teams any longer, right? So yeah, there might be a window right now, but I think you also create weird dynamics when it comes to the kind of decision-making process on a long-term basis. So what I'm saying with that is when there is ownership involved, and let's say it's equal ownership involved, it's not an easy task to deal with player changes. And also, like, if you are the kind of like full decision maker as a player of the face of the team, then I don't think you get the objectiveness that you actually need in order to make the hard calls that you every now and then have to make. So I think there are a lot of teams that in a non-player organization, so to speak, they might have split up earlier, and some of the players might have gone on and become bigger stars in other organizations earlier, but they just remain in that team because they're locked into for a very long contract. And due to the mechanism of ownership. So I see the window, I see the opportunity, but then again, we cannot fool ourselves knowing that being a great Counter-Strike player, being on the road, it actually consumes so much time you cannot even imagine. Our guys, I mean, if they were a bit mindful and had frequent flyer points with every flight they go on.
Dude, I don't know how people don't. I don't know how, like, that was the first thing I did.
That's the business idea, but we help players to sort these things out. That would be a thing. There you have something for the player union, by the way. But anyway, I guess you got my point, where I think there is bottom line is I think there's a window right now. If you are a very successful player with a strong fan base, it is possible. Look at Carlos, that's Ocelot from G2, was not even decent, a very good League of Legends player for many years, right? That went on to build his own organization, qualify for LCS, diversified, create a CSGO team, Vainglory and other teams right now. He's done it really well. But I also think you have example, without mentioning anyone, like any company, that they haven't really succeeded, even both in the field of sports, but also field of business. And again, I'm just sitting here in the office now. I'm sitting in kind of like the small office space we have in one of the rooms here. But behind me here, it's like 9 p.m. and we have 10 people working in the office. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of things you have to do as an esport business. So yeah, I'm a bit skeptic, I have to say. But again, I definitely understand it from a pure like passion or being a bit opportunistic when you actually have a good run as a player. It can make sense, but it's not an easy task. Let's conclude on that.
Right. Well, we've explored the business side of it. One thing I just wanted to touch on as well is we mentioned the camaraderie of the team, right? And how that's an important factor that actually maybe led to the demise of the current lineup. Well, the previous lineup, I should say. You're bringing in Twistz, right? Who famously has turned down a lot of offers from top organizations, mainly NIP, most notably, because he said he wanted to play with his friends. What do you feel like was the deciding factor that managed to bring him into the Fnatic lineup?
First of all, a very talented player, still a young player. He has seen some success, of course, but I do think under our wings, with teaming up with Olof Meister and Dennis and other players, I think he can have an even more bright future ahead of him, right? So yeah, obviously I heard similar rumors, and I guess that make me even further happy that he choose us as a team and an organization to play for. But yeah, I think they're also going to find themselves in an environment that is quite differently to where they've been before. We have obviously business people. I'm not sitting with a business degree or anything like that. I kind of learned that part throughout, traveling to probably 500 different esports events and being a player myself. But yeah, we in our pro gaming side of things, meaning the teams, the department that I run in Fnatic, we more or less only hire previous pro gamers or current pro gamers even for team management roles. So we understand them probably I mean, in my opinion at least, we understand our players and we communicate really well with them. And we try to identify both the opportunities they have, but also the weaknesses they have as players, and try to like put them on the right in the right direction. So yes, interesting that it turned out some of this offer before. Perhaps I would have done it differently, but ultimately I'm happy to have him and also the other two players in our organization, right?
So
I think Lekro is going to be a young talent everyone needs to start watching. I was really excited with him and Godsent throughout his time there. So I think you guys might be all right with that lineup.
one of the issues Matt and I were discussing just before you came on, we were kind of having this discussion about the whole player-owned orgs and esports organizations. Have you like set out a sort of roadmap in terms of like events you want the team to attend? Are you happy for them to say, we're not ready for this event coming up here necessarily? Like, do you want them to have the time to practice first before potentially having like a demoralizing event?
I mean, to honor what you said, right? Meaning that we are listening to our players, that they do obviously kind of dictate when they feel ready and whatnot, right? But I don't think we should lose any speed in terms of like getting things into place. So, I mean, we do have invites to. I mean, I need to be careful now because I don't know what's announced.
Yeah, sure.
And that
you
is not.
can just say some leagues, it's fine.
Just say them all, man. They're all announced. It's fine.
Back to playing the ESL Pro League, and we have ECS coming up as well.
Yeah.
Do not know when exactly, but aside from that, yes, we're going to do those LAN tournaments, right? Whichever these ones are in the next month, even weeks to come. So from my side, from my point of view, we should not have any hesitation to go into the battles that we one day need to face anyway, right? So it's not like we're going to send these guys to northern Sweden, plug them in with a fiber connection, take their smartphones and let them listen to someone old as me speak about Counter-Strike for 2 weeks, right? No, we're going to business as usual, online practice, perhaps a boot camp prior to the next events. But yeah, I cannot sit here and say we're ready to face the best teams in the world, but we need a few days practice and then we just need to go in and do that and be very managing our expectations and also learn as fast as we can and also identify what kind of game type, what kind of style we should play from. And that is something that's going to be really interesting and something that passionates me a lot. Kind of identifying what tools do we have in our toolbox and how should we play our cards. That I think that's going to be like the most important thing for us in the next months to come.
Yeah, just quickly, as someone who is a former player, is that you say that excites you, but with time constraints and the amount of tournaments, is that something that even it's in itself, especially like normally, like again, I come from COD, but on a new team, you just pug your first few days. You literally just go nuts in a server, sometimes not even doing anything that's remotely close to what you do in a game, but you kind of get used to each other's nuances and how aggressive they are. Is that how you take it in this approach, or do you go in with roles in mind, try it and say, right, that didn't work, let's swap this?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the latter, right? It's not like we just like buy a puzzle and we just take up all the pieces and have a look at them. Okay, how do we figure this out? We have a general idea, of course, but before you get into the server, before you're starting to face both victories, defeats, round losses, round victories, missed snipe shots, bad in-game calls, etc., right? We need to be careful how we define and conclude on things, right? But then again, we talk about a very dynamic game. Yes, the maps are not changing drastically over time, but the way the game is played can change fairly quickly, and especially these days when Valve are quite active when it comes to updating the game, right? Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the worse.
SMG sounds, man, they need changing every week.
Yeah. I don't fully get that, but then again, I'm not a very well-versed CSGO player as of now, but we should never, I mean, that's just the kind of mindset we need to go into this, right? We cannot be foreign to the idea of change. We need to embrace it. We need to do everything we can on our end to make this work. But again, as I probably started out to say in a previous rant, we do appreciate the risk we're taking here, but based on, I mean, I can only say so much about the situation, the transaction, transfer of players and whatnot, right? But I think everyone, to a certain degree, is a winner here because we have combined in the bucket of decision making. It's been like the players' desires, what is feasible, how can Fnatic still be relevant. Importantly here as well, long term, how can we remain as a relevant CSGO team or any kind of Counter-Strike edition team for years to come? And honestly, I think based on how I look at the situation, based on the conversation I have with all our players, we think that this is the right way to go to stay here as Fnatic. maybe shouldn't come from me, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are the best Counter-Strike franchise in the history, and that's something I value highly. It's part of my DNA almost, and that's something we're not willing to just give up just like that. So when people think like, what the fuck is Fnatic doing? We are actually considering things. We are looking at it in many different angles, right? I can sit here in 2 months' time, and there might be player changes. You never know, right?
Sure.
But I have a good gut feeling about this, and we just need to be, confident in our thing, right? And do everything we can again.
I think that's a really nice way to tie it up. I think that's like that we've kind of explored the team, the business side of it, and your hopes for the future. You seem really excited about it. It's quite refreshing to hear someone like you actually come on and discuss it as a former player yourself. You kind of lived this. We kind of discussed your past as well. And I think it's not as black and white as everyone makes it out to be. Obviously, a lot of people have been saying Godsend have got the better side of this deal. But I think in terms of like the passion and the backing you guys can actually offer to this lineup, I don't think it's as clean cut as that. I really feel like, although yes, it may take some time, I think there's a lot to come from this side, and I think it's going to be a really exciting development.
Totally, and I want to stress the fact that we have really good relationship with all the players, including the ones that stays with us, of course, but also the players that departed from us. Cool. I have nothing but respect for these guys, everything they've done for us. We're going to try to collaborate with Godsend, and that goes for other teams as well, as much as we can, right? We talked about organizations, the importance, I think at least, they have in the ecosystem. And I tend to say this when I speak to media, when I speak to investors or whoever I speak to, that it actually doesn't help us when other organizations fucks up, right? Because it's just going to reflect negatively on us. We all have to be consistent with our dealings, pay those fucking salaries, be versatile, adapt to the changing landscape, listen to the players, speak to the players in a way they actually respect. So that, I mean, maybe not my closing words, because my closing words want to be, again, a big thank you to basically everyone in Godsend, including the players I used to have in our organization before. That's Pronax and Snyder, of course, thanks to the Godsend management, and of course Jesper, Robin, and Freddie, who had done so much for our organization, our fan base, our CS legacy. You're always welcome back. Maybe not short term. We're gonna beat you in the game first, but yeah, we're gonna see you on tour. And yeah. Thanks for having me, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, this is excellent, and I think it's you've been through this before, as we mentioned with your shuffle. You bring a lot of insight, and we're excited. I think, like I said, I think this excites a lot of people to see what happens for the rest of the year. So thanks very much, cArn.
It gives some people like you something to talk about, right? So you're not bored the entire day.
Exactly.
So,
We need something.
That's why we're here. You guys dropped the bomb for us. It's perfect. Yeah. It's the only way I can stay relevant these days is just talking. I don't know why, but thanks very much.
You love it.
You
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Patrick. See you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Perfect.